I've often said white supremacy can't exist inside a vacuum. Well, neither can morality. The question I want to put to you is, can a man be moral without economic independence? The direct answer is yes, but not all the time. Well, the question that follows from that is, can a moral man be moral part of the time? Because we live in a world that runs on money. And the number one reason moral men find themselves compelled to compromise their morality isn't sex or some other temptation or ethical quandary. It's usually financial. I'll use an example everyone's familiar with, Jesus Christ. Sure, he was clever and when called for aggressive, but mostly he was a good example of what happened when a moral man also was the source of his own income. The Romans could not bully him, the Pharisees could not intimidate him, and the world could not stop him. Some people may have thought Jesus crass. Most preachers refuse to mention Christ's economic savvy except as a cheap ploy to get more tithes. But the fact of the matter is, the entire reason for having and controlling your economics is to insulate yourself from a hostile environment. I guess it's because black men have spent so long being powerless that we've forgotten how power works, and at this point we've lost interest in observing it in the world around us. We've been economically deprived for so long we're psychologically locked in a mental cage where the only use of power we can think of always relies on trying to get things done without money. This is where all the marching and chanting comes into play. When you're broke in a world that runs on money, that's what you're reduced to. The problem is your enemies are insulated from your marching and chanting. Yes, you'll get some attention, but as the Missouri University football team proved, if you want to put some heads on your trophy wall, you must be able to hit your enemies in his pockets and do so from a position of strength where he cannot hit yours. They controlled the school's purse strings, not the chancellor, and they weren't afraid to use their power. Black men's fear factor, however, is a subject that I'll address later. Money is a tool. It's amoral. You can build a school with it or a bomb. It's your choice. Having it, having a lot of it, is not a bad thing. The idea that having money means you're morally deficient is slave thinking. The amount of money that you have is irrelevant. What you use it for is what matters. Our enemies are using it to attack us, and without an economy to defend ourselves, we are taking losses daily. No group can endure this level of one-sided defeats without eventually being annihilated. If a man has a hammer and decides to use it against you as a weapon, does it make any sense for you to call the hammer immoral? And does it make you moral to decide that since you would never use a tool in that way, that you don't want to use a tool at all? If the bastard's got a weapon, then you get one too. In fact, get a bigger one since he'll think twice before attacking you. Power is used as a shield long before it's used as a sword, and only a fool confuses the way a tool is used with the inherent value of the tool itself. Khalid Muhammad was another black man who had his own means, and when he stood with Louis Farrakhan, he was bold. And although criticism for his remarks regarding Jews caused Farrakhan to disavow him, Khalid stood strong regardless, even against Minister Farrakhan himself. The definition of economics is this: the system by which resources are distributed. That's it. Economics is not about money per se. You could live in a moneyless society, and unless you or your people control the resources and or the means of production, you will still be the poorest people on earth. This was certainly true in the ancient world when the dregs of Asia kept begging at Africa's door, and historically they remained beggars up until they eventually brought their ignorant numbers to bums rush the door en masse. Africa controlled the resources. The rest of the world did not, and it's no accident that the closer to Africa the Caucasoid races lived, the more prosperous, cultured, and knowledgeable they happened to be. The farther away they were, not so much. So get over this idea that morality and prosperity should be mutually exclusive. That's a recipe for perpetual poverty. Your enemy will gladly incentivize you to shun money or resources because that's what keeps him in power. Historically, the most revered and not surprisingly the most powerful men were both moral and wealthy. And yes, while the wealth followed the morality, the point is the wealth was always there. So, when there was trouble, no matter how tough the bad guys imagined themselves to be, the moral, wealthy kings could always face them down. The moral king's wealth empowered those who served them so that their agenda was the people's. But more importantly, the people depended on the moral man for their livelihood. Money is a tool. It moves people. It gets things done. You can use it to arm a group of ruthless marauders or to arm a group of righteous defenders. It's your choice. But you won't be choosing anything unless you have some resources with which to leverage those choices. Trying to find ways around this simple truth is a large part of why we are in the fix we're in today. Black men are hell-bound and determined to talk around the issue. We value the gift of the gab because it's cheap. Problem is that ultimately it's also weak. I didn't say powerless, but it is weak. Now, when you combine a moral man's words with a surplus of resources, now you have power, power that can change the world. But black men seem to fear that. We fear having to slay the dragons. We've been taught to worship our oppressors and to put their needs and wishes before our own. To fight them will naturally mean displeasing them, and even before we start to fight, we've already defeated ourselves because we hate the idea of displeasing, much less defying, the former slave masters. We also fear having to take on the natural responsibilities of managing and perpetuating enormous enterprises. And you know what the sad part is? If someone from the dominant society came in and told you to go to the boardroom and that you better learn the P&L reports and you better spend 80 hours a week doing upper management duties while they go and lounge around the pool, you would do that without a moment's hesitation. All of a sudden, managing large enterprises wouldn't be so impossible anymore. Morality wouldn't even enter into your mind. However, if you have power, and another man tries to get you to do something, morality is almost a prerequisite because you now have the ability to consider not only whether it's worth your time or if you even want to do it, but also you have the ability to consider whether it's the right thing to do. When's the last time you've had the chance to do that on a 9-to-5 job? Power and morality are cousins to one another, not enemies. Morality requires power, because morality requires protection and the ability to assert itself. Morality is not the servant of moral men. It is our master. It tells us what to do, and if we have any sense, we obey it. It defines right from wrong, protects us today, and ensures the security and prosperity of our children tomorrow. But it requires a total commitment from us. There's no such thing as part-time morality. That's like saying part-time oppression. Morality is not a default state of being any more than order is. Morality must be built and maintained, no different than a city or a business. Without power, there's no sense in discussing morality beyond the narrowest of terms. You literally can't afford it. A moral man is moral all the time, whether it pleases others or not, whether it's easy or not. True morality is a choice that others cannot pressure, influence, or tempt you from making. A moral man is also a realistic one, because morality is not some imaginary make-believe thing. It's not a feeble philosophical abstract. We practice it with parents, siblings, and our own children. Beyond that, our friends and those in our communities. It shapes us and through us the world. This is not some hokey, corny, pie-in-the-sky thing. It's concrete, it's practical, and it's necessary. There's a difference between morality and utopianism. The former accepts that hard work and focus are a requirement. The other relies on happy thoughts and making nice with everyone. Believe me, I know the difference, and I hope you do too. And just as you can't discuss a political system or an economic system without taking into account the realities of the world, so it makes no sense to call yourself moral without asking what type of environment your morality exists in, so that from there you can intelligently figure out what you must do to change that environment. Don't take this lightly, because when you look out your door, hell, when you look at your own life, You probably see the direct result of what happens when morality is crushed to its knees, dumped in the ditch, and left for dead. You see what happens in a world where the bad guys are winning and the good guys are too apathetic and in denial to even do what's required of them. Morality is not a trivial thing, but if you approach the matter without enough power to enforce it, then you're pipe dreaming. Hold on to your morals. You need them now more than ever. And while you're at it, get some power. Lots of it. You need that more than ever, too.